The massive space station Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars, its crystal towers gleaming under the light of distant suns. For 300 years, it had served as the meeting place for the Galactic Council, where dozens of alien species gathered to discuss trade, resolve disputes, and welcome new members to their peaceful alliance. Today was special. The Council was about to meet the newest species to request membership, humans from a small blue planet called Earth. Ambassador Helen Morrison adjusted her simple gray suit as she walked through the station's grand corridor. She had spent 20 years in diplomatic service, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The corridor stretched ahead like a crystal cathedral, filled with beings she had only seen in briefing files. Tall, elegant creatures with silver skin glided past, while small furry beings with 6 arms scurried between their legs. The air hummed with dozens of different languages and the soft chime of translation devices. Behind her walked Dr. Marcus Webb, carrying a small case filled with samples of human art and literature. His brown hair was already messy from nervously running his fingers through it. As Earth's leading expert on alien cultures, he had studied every known species in the galaxy, but seeing them in person made his hands shake with excitement. The third member of their small group was Sergeant Jake Collins, a United States Marine assigned as their security escort. He walked quietly behind the 2 civilians, his dress uniform pressed and perfect. At 32, Jake had served in 3 combat zones on Earth, but he had never imagined he would end up guarding diplomats in space. His job was simple: protect the ambassador and stay out of the way. The trio reached the council chamber, where a dozen alien representatives waited around a circular table made of some kind of glowing blue stone. The sight took Helen's breath away. She had seen pictures, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of meeting truly alien minds. High Counselor Vextar of the Zephyrian Collective rose from his seat. His insect-like body stood nearly 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the chamber's soft light. Despite his intimidating appearance, his movements were gentle and precise. When he spoke, his voice came through the translation device as warm and welcoming. Ambassador Morrison, Dr. Webb, Sergeant Collins, welcome to Nexus Prime. We have waited many cycles to meet your species. Helen stepped forward and bowed slightly, as her briefings had instructed. High Counselor, thank you for this opportunity. Humanity is honored to be considered for membership in the Galactic Council. Beside Vextar, a being that looked like a living crystal sculpture leaned forward. This was Chalice of the Lumini Harmony, her body composed of what appeared to be translucent blue gems that chimed softly when she moved. Your species is fascinating, Ambassador. We have studied your transmissions, your art, your music. Such beauty, such creativity. We sense great gentleness in your people. Marcus Webb nearly dropped his case in excitement. Thank you, Chalice. We've brought samples of human culture to share with you. Poetry, paintings, music from many different regions of our world. The aliens murmured with interest. General Thomas's, a large reptilian being with dark green scales, watched from the far end of the table. Unlike the others, he didn't seem particularly impressed. His yellow eyes studied the humans with what might have been disappointment. Before we begin formal discussions, Vextar announced, we would like to learn more about your people. Please, tell us about humanity. Helen had practiced this moment for months. She spoke about Earth's diverse cultures, about the United Nations and how different nations work together to solve problems. She explained human art, science, and philosophy. The aliens listened with growing delight, occasionally asking questions. That showed their genuine interest. Remarkable, Chalice chimed. You have achieved global cooperation without a hive mind or collective consciousness. How do you manage conflicts between your different groups? We have many ways, Helen replied. Negotiation, trade agreements, cultural exchange programs. We've learned that talking is usually better than fighting. Dr. Webb opened his case and began showing samples of human creativity. He shared paintings from different cultures, played recordings of music from around the world, and read translations of poetry. Several aliens were visibly moved by a haiku about cherry blossoms, while others marveled at a photograph of the northern lights. Throughout the presentation, Jake Collins stood quietly near the wall. Occasionally, he would help Dr. Webb with technical equipment or assist with carrying displays. When Vexstar asked him to adjust the lighting for a painting, Jake politely complied. When Chalice needed help reaching a high shelf, Jake was there with a stepladder. "Your escort is very helpful," observed Kent of the Aquatic Collective, his fish-like head tilting curiously. "Is this typical behavior for your military personnel?" "Jake represents the best of our Marines," Helen said proudly. "Our military serves the people, not the other way around. They help wherever they're needed." General Thomas's shifted in his seat. "Military that serves civilians?" His translator conveyed a tone of confusion. "How do they maintain discipline? How do they prepare for combat?" Jake spoke for the first time since entering the chamber. "We train hard, sir, but we also learn to help. A good Marine protects people, whether that's in battle or just carrying boxes." The aliens exchanged glances. In their experience, military castes were either completely separate from civilian populations or didn't exist at all. The idea of warriors who also served as helpers was strange to them. As the day continued, the humans shared more about their world. They talked about hospitals where people were healed regardless of their ability to pay, about schools where children from different backgrounds learned together, about rescue workers who risked their lives to save strangers. The aliens were charmed by these examples of human kindness and cooperation. Vexstar asked about human technology, and Dr. Webb eagerly explained their achievements in medicine, communication, and space travel. The aliens were impressed but not overwhelmed. Many species had achieved similar technological levels before joining the council. "What about your methods of defense?" General Thomas asked. "How do you protect yourselves from threats?" Helen chose her words carefully. "We have police forces to maintain order and military forces to protect our planet. But we prefer to solve problems through cooperation and mutual benefit." "Admirable," Chalice chimed. "Many species come to us seeking membership because they want protection from more aggressive neighbors. But you seem to have achieved peace through wisdom rather than strength." As the formal presentations ended, the aliens invited the humans to join them for dinner in the station's dining hall. The meal was a celebration of galactic diversity, foods from dozens of worlds arranged on a vast table. Jake helped serve dishes and made sure everyone had what they needed, his polite demeanor earning smiles from beings who had never seen a warrior act as a servant. The conversations continued late, into the station's artificial night. The aliens spoke of their own worlds, their histories, their achievements in art and science. The humans listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and sharing their own experiences. By the end of the evening, it was clear that the aliens had made up their minds about humanity. They saw a species that was creative, cooperative, and peaceful. The humans seemed almost too gentle for the sometimes harsh realities of galactic politics, but their kindness and willingness to help made them ideal candidates for council membership. General Thomas's remained skeptical, but he was outnumbered. As the evening wound down, he approached Jake Collins with a question that had been bothering him all day. "Sergeant, I must ask, your species seems very peaceful. How do you handle truly dangerous situations? What do you do when kindness is not enough?" Jake looked up from where he was helping clear dishes. His answer was simple and honest. "We do what we have to do, sir, but we always try talking first." The general nodded, though he didn't look entirely satisfied. In his experience, species that relied on talking didn't last long in a galaxy where some neighbors preferred taking to asking. 3 weeks had passed since the humans arrived at Nexus Prime, and the diplomatic mission was going better than anyone had hoped. Ambassador Helen Morrison had successfully negotiated preliminary trade agreements with 4 different species, while Dr. Marcus Webb had become something of a celebrity among the station's cultural scholars. His daily presentations on human art and literature drew crowds of curious aliens who hung on every word. Jake Collins had settled into a comfortable routine. When he wasn't standing guard during formal meetings, he helped wherever he was needed. He fixed broken equipment, moved furniture, and even helped in the station's hydroponics gardens when the aquatic collective needed someone with steady hands to transplant delicate coral specimens. The aliens had grown fond of the quiet Marine who never complained about any task, no matter how small. The evening of the 21st day brought an informal dinner gathering in the station's smaller dining hall. High Counselor Vextar had suggested it as a way for the humans to meet more council members in a relaxed setting. The circular table was set with foods from a dozen different worlds, and the conversation flowed as freely as the exotic beverages. Ambassador Morrison found herself seated between Chalice of the Lumini Harmony and Commander Zix of the Crystalline Confederation. Dr. Webb sat across from her, enthusiastically explaining the differences between Earth's various musical traditions to a group of fascinated listeners. Jake Collins sat at the far end of the table, quietly eating his meal and listening to the conversations around him. The diversity of human culture is truly remarkable, Chalice chimed, her crystal body reflecting the warm light of the dining hall. On Lumini, we achieved harmony through shared consciousness centuries ago. All our art, all our music, comes from the same source. But humans create beauty from their differences. Commander Zix nodded agreement, his geometric head catching the light. The Confederation has always struggled with this. Our different crystal formations think in completely different ways. We have had to develop complex protocols just to communicate with each other. How do you handle disagreements? Dr. Webb asked, genuinely curious. I mean, when your different formations want different things. We use mathematical formulas to find optimal solutions, Zix replied. Each formation inputs their requirements, and our computers calculate the best compromise. It takes time, but it prevents conflict. The conversation naturally turned to conflict resolution, and each species shared their methods. The Zephyrians described how their hive mind eliminated disagreement by sharing all thoughts and feelings instantly. The Aquatic Collective explained their meditation rituals that helped different schools of fish-like beings reach consensus. The Drachner representative, a younger officer named Captain Voss, spoke of their rigid caste system that prevented disputes. By clearly defining everyone's role, what about humans? Asked Vextar, his compound eyes focusing on Ambassador Morrison. How do you resolve conflicts between your different nations and cultures? Helen set down her fork and smiled. We have many methods. The United Nations provides a forum where all countries can discuss problems. We have international courts to settle legal disputes. We use economic cooperation to build relationships that make conflict less likely. Fascinating, Chalice chimed. And this works? Most of the time, Helen admitted. We've had our share of problems, but we've learned from our mistakes. We have international laws now, treaties that help prevent misunderstandings from becoming bigger problems. Dr. Webb nodded enthusiastically. We've developed entire fields of study around peaceful conflict resolution. Diplomacy, mediation, arbitration. We even have laws that govern how conflicts should be conducted when they do occur. The aliens around the table looked puzzled. Captain Voss leaned forward, his scaled brow furrowed in confusion. Laws that govern conflicts? I do not understand. The Geneva Conventions, Dr. Webb explained. They're international agreements that set rules for warfare. They protect civilians, ensure proper treatment of prisoners, ban certain weapons, things like that. The dining hall fell silent. The concept seemed to hang in the air like a strange smell that no one could identify. Several aliens exchanged glances, their translation devices working overtime to make sure they had understood correctly. Rules for warfare? Vextara's voice carried a note of bewilderment. You have regulations for conflict. Of course, Helen said, not yet realizing how alien this concept was to her audience. The Geneva Conventions, the Hague Conventions, the Rome Statute. They're some of our most important international agreements. Shala's crystal body dimmed slightly, a sign of deep confusion among her people. But why would you need rules for violence? If you must fight, why would you limit yourselves? Dr. Webb looked around the table and saw the genuine puzzlement on every face. Well, to minimize suffering, to protect innocent people, to make sure that even in war, we don't lose our humanity. Humanity, repeated Commander Zix, his geometric head tilting. This is a concept specific to your species? Not exactly, Helen said carefully. It's more about ... maintaining moral standards even. In difficult situations, protecting the weak, treating enemies with dignity, avoiding unnecessary cruelty. The aliens continued to look confused. Captain Voss spoke up, his voice uncertain. Among the Drachner, when we fight, it is to the death. The strong survive, the weak perish. There are no rules, because there are no survivors to break them. But that's terrible, Dr. Webb exclaimed. What about innocent people caught in the middle? What about children? If they cannot fight, they die, Voss replied matter-of-factly. This is the way of nature. The human delegation looked horrified. Helen tried to explain further. We learned long ago that total warfare destroys everything, including the victors. Our rules exist to preserve civilization itself. What happens when these rules are broken? Asked a small furry being named Pip from the collective of small worlds when someone violates these conventions. They're tried for war crimes, Helen said. International courts can prosecute individuals for violations of the laws of war. War crimes, Vextar repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. This is when someone fights incorrectly. It's when someone does things that are considered so terrible that they're forbidden even in war, Dr. Webb explained. Like deliberately targeting hospitals, or torturing prisoners, or using chemical weapons against civilians. The silence that followed was deafening. Every alien at the table was staring at the humans with expressions ranging from confusion to something that might have been fear. Jake Collins looked up from his meal and noticed the tension in the room. He had been listening to the conversation with half an ear, while enjoying what appeared to be some kind of grilled vegetable that tasted remarkably like corn. But now he saw that his companions had somehow upset their hosts. Is there a problem? He asked quietly. Shalis turned toward him, her crystal body pulsing with nervous energy. Sergeant Collins, we are trying to understand these war crimes your species has defined. The concept is ... foreign to us. Jake set down his fork and looked around the table. He could see the confusion and growing unease in the alien faces. These beings had spent 3 weeks getting to know humans as gentle, helpful creatures who shared art and poetry. Now they were learning about rules for warfare, and it was clearly disturbing them. You want to know what war crimes are? Jake asked calmly. I can explain that. The aliens leaned forward, drawn by something in the Marine's tone. There was a quality to his voice that hadn't been there before, something that made the air in the dining hall feel suddenly heavier. Ambassador Morrison looked nervous. Jake, maybe we should. No, it's okay, Jake said, his eyes still fixed on the curious alien faces around the table. They want to understand. I think they should understand. He paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet but clear, carrying the weight of experience that the aliens had never heard from him before. War crimes are things so terrible, so beyond normal combat, that even in war, we decided they're forbidden. They're the things that make us stop being human and start being monsters. The dining hall remained silent, but now it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of beings who had just realized they might have seriously misunderstood the species sitting across from them. Jake Collins looked around the silent dining hall, studying the alien faces that stared back at him. For 3 weeks, these beings had seen him as a helpful, quiet escort who carried boxes and fixed broken equipment. They had no idea what those boxes had contained, or what kind of training had taught him to fix things so efficiently. Now they wanted to understand war crimes, and Jake realized they truly had no concept of what humans were capable of. He leaned back in his chair, his hands folded calmly on the table. When he spoke, his voice was steady and matter-of-fact, like a teacher explaining a simple lesson. "Let me start with something basic," Jake said. "War crimes exist because humans had to create rules to stop ourselves from doing things that were too horrible even for war." Vextara's compound eyes focused intently on the Marine. "But if these things help you win conflicts, why would you forbid them?" "Because winning isn't worth becoming something evil," Jake replied. "We learned that the hard way." He paused, organizing his thoughts. These aliens had never seen human warfare, never witnessed what people could do to each other when all restraints were removed. They needed to understand not just what war crimes were, but why humans had found it necessary to define them. "The first rule is about civilians," Jake continued. "Non-combatants, people who aren't fighting. In war, you're only supposed to target enemy soldiers, not innocent people." Chalice's crystal body chimed softly with confusion. "But if you spare the enemy's people, they can support their fighters. They can make weapons, grow food, provide information." "Yes, they can," Jake agreed. "But we decided that deliberately killing innocent people makes you a monster, not a soldier, even if it would help you win." Captain Voss leaned forward, his scaled features showing genuine puzzlement. "This seems inefficient. Among the Drachner, we destroy everything that belongs to our enemies. Their warriors, their families, their cities. Complete victory." "And how many Drachner civilizations have you completely destroyed?" Jake asked quietly. The question hung in the air. Voss shifted uncomfortably, but didn't answer. Jake continued his explanation, his tone remaining calm and educational. "The second major rule is about prisoners. When enemy soldiers surrender, you have to keep them alive and treat them decently. You can't torture them for information, and you can't kill them after they've given up fighting." "Why not?" asked Pip, the small, furry being. "They were trying to kill you moments before." "Because they stopped trying to kill us," Jake said simply. "When someone surrenders, they're no longer a threat. Killing helpless people isn't combat, it's murder." Dr. Webb shifted nervously in his seat. He could see where this conversation was heading, and he wasn't sure the aliens were ready for it. Ambassador Morrison looked equally uncomfortable, but she didn't interrupt. They had opened this door, and now Jake was walking through it. "The third rule is about weapons," Jake continued. "Some weapons are so terrible that we've agreed never to use them, even against enemy soldiers." Commander Zix's geometric head tilted with interest. What kind of weapons could be too terrible for war? Jake thought for a moment, then decided to start with something relatively simple. Chemical weapons, poison gas. It kills slowly and painfully, and it's hard to control. The wind can blow it onto your own troops or onto innocent people. The aliens absorbed this information, still looking confused but beginning to show signs of unease. "Then there are biological weapons," Jake said. "Diseases created to kill people. The problem is, diseases don't stop at borders. They don't care if you're a soldier or a child. Once you release a plague, it can spread everywhere." Several aliens made sounds of distress. The concept of weaponized disease was horrifying to species that had evolved past most natural pathogens. Jake's voice remained steady, but there was something in his eyes now that hadn't been there before. And then there are the weapons we've only used twice. Nuclear weapons. Bombs that can destroy entire cities in seconds, leaving the land poisoned for generations. The dining hall was completely silent now. Even the quiet background hum of the station system seemed muted. You have weapons that can destroy cities? Vextaris' voice was barely above a whisper. We have weapons that can destroy planets. Jake said matter-of-factly. But we decided that using them makes you a criminal, not a victor. General Thomases had been listening from the doorway, having arrived late to the dinner. Now he stepped into the room, his heavy footsteps echoing in the silence. How many of these weapons do you possess? He asked, his voice carefully controlled. Jake looked at the reptilian general for a long moment before answering. Enough. The word fell like a stone into still water, sending ripples of fear through the assembled aliens. Ambassador Morrison finally found her voice. Jake, maybe we should explain the context. No, Jake said, not taking his eyes off the aliens. They asked what war crimes are. They need to understand why we needed to define them. He turned back to address the table. These rules didn't come from nowhere. They exist because humans did all of these things. We killed civilians, we tortured prisoners. We used poison gas and biological weapons. We burned cities and poisoned the land. The aliens stared at him in growing horror. But the worst part wasn't what we did to our enemies, Jake continued. The worst part was what it did to us. When you throw away all the rules, when you decide that winning is more important than staying human, you become something else. Something that your own people start to fear, Dr. Webb tried to interject. But we learn from those mistakes. That's why we created the Geneva Conventions. Why we established international courts. We created those rules. Jake said, cutting him off gently. Because we scared ourselves. Because we realized that if we didn't set limits, there wouldn't be anything left worth saving. Chalice's crystal body was pulsing rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. But surely these are historical events. Your species has evolved past such brutality. Jake's smile was sad and knowing. The last major war crimes trial was 3 years ago. The weapons I'm talking about, we still have them. We still make new ones. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Then why don't you use them? Captain Voss asked, his voice hoarse with confusion and fear. Because we choose not to, Jake said simply. Every day, every conflict, every moment when someone makes us angry enough to want to hurt them, we choose not to use everything we're capable of. He looked around the table, meeting each alien's gaze in turn. That's what war crimes really are. They're not things we can't do. They're things we won't do, even when doing them would be easier. General Thomases spoke from the doorway, his voice heavy with new understanding. Your restraint is not weakness, it is control. Yes, Jake agreed. The strongest thing a human can do is choose not to fight, even when we're capable of winning. The aliens sat in stunned silence, processing what they had learned. The gentle, helpful species they had welcomed with such enthusiasm was not what they had seemed. Humans were not peaceful because they lacked the capacity for violence. They were peaceful despite having perfected it. Vextar was the first to speak, his voice trembling slightly. How do you live with this knowledge? How do you function knowing what your species is capable of? Jake picked up his fork and took another bite of the grilled vegetable, chewing thoughtfully before answering. Same way you live with knowing that you could hurt someone if you wanted to, he said. You just choose not to. The difference is, we've had to make that choice on a much bigger scale. He looked around the table one more time, seeing the fear and confusion in their faces. The rules exist because we need them, not because we're weak, but because we're dangerous. War crimes are the line between civilization and chaos, and we guard that line every single day. The dining hall remained silent long after Jake finished speaking, the weight of humanity's true nature settling over the assembled aliens like a heavy blanket they weren't sure they wanted to keep. The news of the dinner conversation spread through Nexus Prime like wildfire. Within hours, every alien on the station had heard some version of what the human Marine had said. By the next morning, urgent messages were being sent to homeworlds across the galaxy, and emergency sessions were being called in government buildings on dozens of planets. Ambassador Helen Morrison found herself facing a very different kind of diplomatic challenge. Instead of trade negotiations and cultural exchanges, her schedule was suddenly filled with private meetings requested by nervous alien delegates who wanted to understand more about human military capabilities. The first to request a meeting was Commander Zix of the Crystalline Confederation. He arrived at the human quarters early in the morning, his geometric form reflecting the corridor lights and sharp angles. His usual calm demeanor was replaced by obvious agitation. "Ambassador Morrison," he said without his typical formal greeting, "we need to discuss your species' military history." Helen invited him into their small conference room, where Dr. Marcus Webb was already reviewing files on his portable computer. Jake Collins stood near the wall, as he always did during meetings, but now Commander Zix kept glancing at him nervously. "What would you like to know?" Helen asked, trying to keep her voice diplomatic and calm. "Everything," Zix replied. "We have been analyzing your historical records since last night. The numbers do not make sense to us." Dr. Webb looked up from his computer. "What numbers?" "Casualties," Zix said bluntly. "Your Second World War involved over 100 million deaths. 100 million. We thought this was a translation error." Helen and Marcus exchanged glances. They had known this moment would come eventually, but they had hoped to have more time to prepare. "The translation is correct," Helen said carefully. "That was our largest conflict, but not our only one." Commander Zix's crystalline body dimmed with what his species displayed as shock. The Crystalline Confederation has been spacefaring for over 2,000 years. In all that time, all our conflicts combined have resulted in fewer than 50,000 deaths. You achieved more casualties in single battles. Dr. Webb pulled up a file on his computer, then hesitated. "Would you like me to show you the historical records? They're part of our standard cultural database." "Yes," Zix said, though his voice suggested he was already regretting the request. For the next hour, Dr. Webb walked Commander Zix through human military history. The aliens' shock grew with each conflict discussed. The American Civil War, the Napoleonic Wars, the Mongol conquests, the Roman Empire's expansion. Each one represented casualty figures that exceeded anything in crystalline history. "But how did your civilization survive?" Zix asked, his voice filled with bewilderment. "How do you still exist after destroying so many of your own people?" "We learned," Jake said quietly from his position near the wall. "Eventually." Similar meetings were happening throughout the station. Captain Voss of the Drachner Republic requested a session with Jake Collins specifically, wanting to understand human military doctrine. The meeting took place in one of the station's training rooms, where Voss could examine some of the equipment Jake had brought. "Show me your weapons," Voss demanded, his reptilian features tense with curiosity and fear. Jake opened his equipment case and withdrew his sidearm. A standard military pistol. He handled it with practiced ease, checking that it was unloaded before handing it to the Drachner captain. Voss examined the weapon carefully, his clawed fingers tracing its lines. "This seems primitive compared to energy weapons. Why do you still use projectile firearms?" "Because they work," Jake replied simply. "They're reliable, easy to maintain, and the ammunition is cheap to produce. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." "But surely your military has advanced beyond this level?" Jake smiled, but there was no humor in it. Captain, what I'm carrying is personal protection. This isn't military hardware. The distinction was lost on Voss until Jake explained further. Military weapons are designed for different purposes. Anti-tank missiles, artillery shells, guided bombs. The gun you're holding is what we give to individual soldiers for close combat. Voss set the pistol down quickly, as if it had suddenly become hot. Your individual soldiers carry more firepower than most species give to their elite units. That's the idea, Jake agreed. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council's intelligence services were conducting their own investigation. Teams of analysts were reviewing every piece of human data they could access, trying to understand the true scope of human military capability. General Thomason stood in the Council's main intelligence center, watching as displays showed the results of their research. Charts and graphs filled the screens, comparing human military technology with that of known galactic civilizations. The results were disturbing. "Report," he ordered. His chief analyst, a pale being named Quill from the Scholarly Collective, approached, with a data pad clutched in his six-fingered hands. "General, we have completed our preliminary analysis of human military capabilities. The results are concerning." "How concerning?" Quill consulted his datapad, his large eyes darting between the information and his superior. "Based on their historical records and current technology levels, we estimate that humans could theoretically defeat any single member species of the Council in direct military conflict." General Thomas's felt his scales grow cold. "Any single species?" "Yes, sir, but that's not the most disturbing part." Quill's voice dropped almost to a whisper. "We believe they could defeat multiple species simultaneously. Their technology is specifically designed for large-scale warfare against opponents with similar capabilities." "Explain." "Their weapon systems are redundant and modular. Their military doctrine emphasizes overwhelming force and rapid deployment. Most importantly, their entire civilization is structured to support prolonged warfare. They can convert civilian manufacturing to military production within months." General Thomas stared at the display showing human industrial capacity. "They're a warrior species." "No, sir," Quill corrected. "That's what makes them so dangerous. They're not warriors. They're builders who learn to fight. Their entire approach to warfare is based on industrial efficiency and systematic planning." Across the station, other species were reaching similar conclusions. The Aquatic Collective's military advisors were studying human naval warfare and finding techniques that could be adapted to three-dimensional space combat. The Lumini Harmony's Defense Council was analyzing human logistics and discovering organizational methods that could supply armies across interstellar distances. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery came from the Zephyrian Collective's Psychological Analysis Division. They had been studying human behavior patterns, trying to understand how a species could be so violent and yet so restrained. Their report landed on High Counselor Vextara's desk 3 days after the dinner conversation, and its conclusions chilled him to his insectoid core. "Humans," the report stated, "appear to be the only known species that has weaponized their own moral limitations. Their war crimes are not restrictions imposed by weakness, but tactical choices designed to maintain operational effectiveness over extended conflicts." Vextar read the analysis twice before fully grasping its implications. The humans hadn't developed rules for warfare out of squeamishness or moral superiority. They had developed them because unlimited warfare was inefficient and ultimately self-defeating. The report continued. Human military doctrine suggests they view war as a problem to be solved rather than a contest to be won. Their limitations are not moral constraints, but practical tools designed to achieve specific strategic objectives. By the end of the week, the atmosphere on Nexus Prime had changed completely. Aliens who had welcomed the humans with open arms Now watch them with cautious respect tinged with fear. Conversations became more formal, more careful. The casual friendships that had been developing were replaced by polite but distant professional relationships. Dr. Webb noticed the change. First, his cultural presentations, which had drawn enthusiastic crowds, now attracted smaller, more subdued audiences. Aliens still attended, but they asked different questions. Instead of inquiring about human art and music, they wanted to know about human military history and conflict resolution. "They're afraid of us," he told Helen one evening as they reviewed the day's meetings. "Can you blame them?" She replied, "We've spent 3 weeks showing them our gentle side." And then Jake explained why we have rules for mass destruction. Jake overheard their conversation from the next room. He appeared in the doorway, still in his dress uniform but looking tired. "Maybe it's better this way," he said. "Better they know what we're capable of before they make any decisions they might regret." Helen looked at him questioningly. "What do you mean?" "I mean some species out here might have been thinking about testing the new neighbors," Jake replied. "Better they understand the cost before they try." As if to prove his point, an urgent message arrived that evening from the outer systems. The Ravager clans, a nomadic species known for raiding weaker civilizations, had announced they were postponing their planned expansion into human space. No reason was given, but the timing suggested they had heard about the revelations at Nexus Prime. 6 months after the dinner conversation that changed everything, the main assembly hall of Nexus Prime was filled with representatives from every member species of the Galactic Council. The occasion was historic, the formal vote on humanity's membership application. But the debate that preceded it was unlike any in the Council's 300-year history. High Counselor Vextar stood at the central podium, his compound eyes reflecting the nervous energy that filled the hall. The months following the humans' revelations had been turbulent ones for the galaxy. Trade routes had been renegotiated, defense pacts had been reviewed, and several aggressive species had suddenly become much more interested in peaceful diplomacy. "We gather today," Vextar announced, "to vote on the membership application of the human species. But first, we must address the unique circumstances that their candidacy presents." Ambassador Helen Morrison sat in the human delegation area, flanked by Dr. Marcus Webb and Colonel Jake Collins. Yes, Colonel. Jake had been promoted twice in the past 6 months as Earth's military leadership realized the strategic importance of the officer, who had accidentally reshaped galactic politics with a simple explanation. The first speaker was General Thomases, who approached the podium with the measured steps of someone carrying weighty news. His scaled features were grim as he addressed the assembly. "Fellow council members," he began, "our intelligence services have completed their analysis of human military capabilities. The results have forced us to reconsider not just this membership application, but our entire approach to galactic security." He activated a holographic display showing comparative military strength charts. The humans' position on the graphs made several alien delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. "In terms of raw destructive capability," General Thomases continued, "humanity exceeds every council member species. In terms of strategic planning and logistics, they surpass our combined capabilities. Most concerning of all, their entire civilization is designed to support large-scale, prolonged warfare." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. These facts had been circulating for months, but hearing them stated officially made them more real. "However," the general said, raising his voice to quiet the crowd, "we have also discovered something else. In every conflict they have studied, in every military doctrine they have developed, humans consistently choose restraint over maximum force. They could destroy their enemies completely, but they choose not to." Commander Zix of the Crystalline Confederation rose to speak next. His geometric form caught the assembly hall's lights as he addressed his fellow delegates. "The Confederation has reviewed human historical records extensively," he reported. We have found no evidence of genocidal warfare in their recent history. Despite possessing the capability for complete planetary destruction, this suggests a level of self-control that we find unprecedented. Chalice of the Lumini Harmony chimed her agreement. Our psychological analysis indicates that humans have developed cultural mechanisms specifically designed to prevent the total warfare they are capable of conducting. Their war crimes concept is not a limitation, but a deliberate choice to preserve their enemy's ability to rebuild and reconcile. The debate continued for hours. Species after species presented their findings, their concerns, and their recommendations. The picture that emerged was complex. Humans were simultaneously the most dangerous and most restrained species the galaxy had ever encountered. Finally, High Counselor Vextar called for the formal vote. But before the balloting could begin, he made an unprecedented announcement. Before we vote on standard membership, he said, I must present a special proposal from the Council's Executive Committee. The hall fell silent. Special proposals were rare and usually reserved for extraordinary circumstances. We propose, Vextar continued, that humanity be granted full Council membership with an additional designation, Galactic Peace Enforcement. Authority. The silence that followed was profound. Even the humans looked surprised. Vextar explained the proposal. Recent events have demonstrated that the galaxy faces threats that our traditional peaceful methods cannot address. The Ravager clans have been expanding aggressively for decades, and other hostile forces operate beyond our borders. We need a response capability that we have never possessed. General Thomases took the podium again. The humans have agreed to establish a joint military academy where Council species can learn modern warfare techniques, not to become aggressors, but to better defend themselves and others. Colonel Jake Collins stood up in the human delegation area. It was highly unusual for a military officer to address the full Council, but these were unusual times. If I may speak, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. Vextar nodded permission. Jake walked to the center of the assembly hall, where he could see all the delegates. Many of them watched him with a mixture of respect and wariness. This was the human who had explained war crimes, who had opened their eyes to humanity's true nature. 6 months ago, Jake began, you thought we were harmless. Now you think we're dangerous. You're right on both counts. He paused, looking around the vast hall filled with beings from dozens of worlds. We are dangerous. We've proven that throughout our history. But we've also proven something else, that dangerous doesn't have to mean destructive. Strong doesn't have to mean cruel. The ability to wage war doesn't mean you have to choose war. His voice grew stronger, more confident. You're asking us to help protect the galaxy. That's a responsibility we don't take lightly. But we'll do it the human way, with rules, with limits, with the understanding that our enemies today might be our allies tomorrow. The hall remained silent as Jake continued. We'll teach your people how to fight, but more importantly, we'll teach them how to choose not to fight. We'll show them how to be strong enough that nobody wants to test them, but restrained enough that everyone can trust them. He looked directly at the alien leaders as he spoke his final words. The galaxy is safer not because we're peaceful, but because we understand the true cost of war and choose to prevent it whenever possible. Vote that followed was unanimous, not just for membership, but for the special designation as well. Humanity was officially welcomed into the Galactic Council as both a member species and its primary peacekeeping force. 3 months later, the first class of alien cadets arrived at the newly established Interstellar Military Academy on Nexus Prime. Colonel Jake Collins stood before a classroom filled with beings he would have thought were monsters or angels just a year before. Now they were his students. Welcome to Military Ethics 101, he began, writing on the holographic board behind him. Today we're going to talk about the most important weapon in the arsenal, the decision not to use it. A young Drachner raised his clawed hand. Colonel Collins, if we're learning to fight, why do we start with learning not to fight? Jake smiled, remembering his own confusion when he first learned these concepts as a young Marine. Because, Cadet Rax, anyone can destroy. It takes wisdom to protect. Anyone can be strong. It takes courage to be gentle. He turned to address the entire class, seeing the mixture of curiosity and confusion that he remembered from his own early training. Your species sent you here to learn how humans wage war. But the most important thing about human warfare isn't how we fight, it's how we choose when to fight, how we choose how to fight, and most importantly, how we choose when to stop fighting. The lesson continued, but Jake could see understanding beginning to dawn in alien eyes they had never before considered, that strength and restraint could coexist. Meanwhile, in the diplomatic quarters, Ambassador Morrison was reviewing reports from across the galaxy. The Ravager clans had not only abandoned their expansion plans, but had actually requested preliminary peace talks. Several other aggressive species had suddenly become very interested in trade negotiations rather than territorial disputes. Dr. Webb knocked on her office door, carrying a stack of cultural exchange requests. "Helen," he said, "I think we might have underestimated the impact of our arrival here." "How so?" "Look at these requests," he said, spreading the documents across her desk. Every species in the Council wants to establish cultural exchange programs. With Earth, they want to understand how we developed our approach to conflict resolution. Helen smiled as she read through the requests. "They're not afraid of us anymore." "No," Dr. Webb agreed. "They're impressed by us. There's a difference." Outside the station's main viewing port, ships from dozens of worlds moved peacefully through space, their courses coordinated by traffic controllers from species that had been strangers to each other just months before. The galaxy had found something it had never possessed before, not just peace, but the strength to maintain it. And in a small classroom on Nexus Prime, a human Marine continued teaching alien cadets the most dangerous lesson in the universe, that true power comes from knowing when not to use it.